Well, good morning, folks. It is 9 o'clock, and we will go ahead and start recording. We're going to start a little earlier today. Usually we wait till about 9:03, but we're going to start at 9:01. So we got just a minute to let the rest of these folks in, and we're going to go ahead and begin. Our sessions today are going to be right at as close to 50 minutes as we can make them, because we've got 5 sessions back to back to back to back. So we will be doing that as quickly as seamlessly as possible. As you know, there are other Zoom links for you to do because we're in different places. So that's how we're going to do this. But today, our first session is Accurate Agriculture, Powerful Stories, and Diverse Voices. So we'll wait just another minute here as people get in, and we'll begin our session, our first session for the Cultures of Agriculture. As always, if you have questions, you need other stuff, put them in the chat box. We'll watch those as much as I can from our presentation, and we'll see that. From beginning, we're going to go from the slideshow. So you should see my slideshow that's ready to begin. And folks, as I mentioned, my name's Kevin Daugherty. I'm the Education Director for the Illinois Ag in the Classroom program. And we're excited that you've joined us today. And like I said, this is an exciting day for us. We finally made it. It's the end of July. With that, our session today, a little over a year ago, I started thinking about this year's Summer Ag Institute, and I really wanted it to be about the cultures of agriculture. Our goal was for it to be the cultures of agriculture. Now, who knew what that was going to look like? I had it in my mind a year ago, and it changed drastically. The school shutdown, COVID, other national issues all came about. But I still thought it was important to talk about culture. So that's what you're going to get this morning. And then this afternoon, we're going to work with our commodity groups to show other resources the teachers have. But for the first part, Chris, I've got somebody who says they can't hear. Is that a them problem or a me problem? Because I am talking.
That's a them problem. I think I can hear you.
Them problem. Okay, sorry, Patty. Check your stuff. I am online. So when you're looking at a Zoom screen with nothing there, sometimes it's hard to say. But Accurate Agriculture, that's our switching devices. Got a couple people that can't hear, but we are on and we are recording. So we're going to go ahead and keep going. My thought was that as we pulled this together to stop and think about what we do here at Ag in the Classroom. And our goal with Ag in the Classroom is first off to find those pieces of literature that you can use in a classroom that are accurate portrayals of agriculture. So that's our real goal. It's agriculture and our history with books. Illinois Ag in the Classroom and our history with books, we find a natural fit with science. We see that common core focus with ELA and math. We see that. And just so you know, I have a background with both social studies and English language arts. I am a certified teacher in the state of Illinois, taught junior high and high school social studies and history, as well as high school English and junior high English. After I left teaching, I went to work for a publishing company. And as I came to work with the publishing company, I was there for a couple of years developing curriculum and implementing book sales. I came to Illinois Farm Bureau and we started ramping up what we did with children's literature, specifically in the classroom. But first and foremost, we are providing ag books. That's our main goal, is to provide ag books that have an accurate ag fit. So our first goal is ag. So we have an incomplete list of BIPOC, BIPOC and beyond books. So what we wanted to do was share with you the books that have an ag theme, an accurate ag theme, but also have that have main characters or authors. Specifically, I've been looking at main characters who represent folks from both Black and African American, as well as Indigenous people, people of color, Eastern European, specifically with lots of immigration in the throughout Illinois, our history based on that immigration trend, but also with a nod and a look at if it has an LGBTQ component or those who are developmentally delayed. So what I'm really calling this is underrepresented voices with an accurate agriculture feel. That's our first thing. So it has to be accurate agriculture. Secondly, we're looking for, this list contains those voices that are underrepresented, and we want them to be good books too. If kids are going to read them, if you're going to put them in your classroom, they have to be good books. Just a real quick look at this, specifically at diversity in public publishing. Lee and Low Publishers out of New York City, they've established a diversity baseline survey in publishing and what publishing looks like. And Lee and Low, they're the largest multicultural children's book publisher in the United States. They pride themselves on being the diversity source for all things children's literature for classrooms related to diversity. And I've provided you the links there. We actually use several Lee and Low books because they have that accurate agriculture feel. So we've been dealing with this for several years. One of my main stops, typically at the end of May, I would be attending the BEA, the Book Expo of America. And I've attended it for 4 or 5 years. It was in Chicago once, and typically it's in New York City. New York City, it's usually housed at the Javits Center, which is just near Times Square. The Javits Center earlier was transitioned as a large convention center. It was transitioned into a hospital as people were fighting COVID-19. So it was obviously canceled this year, but our goal is to always go out there and find those books, and Lee and Low is always one of my stops. So we're always looking for diversity, but we're also always looking for accurate agriculture. So that's our goal. Remember, our number 1 goal is accurate agriculture. So where do we start? So what I've got for you is I've got a number of books that represent different cultures that have an ag feel, and then I've got lessons to go along with it. And our first book is Seed Folks. Seed Folks by Paul Fleischman. This is this looks at the good and the bad of urban farming. It talks about gardening, triumphs, and tragedies, and there are 13 characters from a highly diverse audience, specifically transitioning an empty lot into a garden in an urban area. Although it's set in Cleveland, it could be Chicago, it could be East St. Louis, it could be anywhere. But this is a 4th through 8th grade. You could use it as a read aloud, you could use it as reader's theater. This is a great book talking about the relationship with the land and a seed, and what happens when we start off in this garden. Now, one of our easy things to transition to is our activity called Garden in a Glove. And basically what you're using is a food handler glove, a plastic glove, a wet cotton ball, and some seeds, sticking the seeds on the cotton ball, pushing them down into each finger, and then put them in a window. You get your own greenhouse in a glove, in a food handler's glove. Cool, easy way to do this. But again, it's introducing this, and the whole fact of this, the book is they're each representing what they grow. So we've got some people growing eggplants, you got some people growing tomatoes, but it all starts out with a young Vietnamese girl growing beans, lima beans, and she's seen by an Eastern European grandmother who kind of watches out over the whole block and wonders what she's doing. Soon the whole block is transitioned into a garden. A great book and excellent ag connections. Another great book to use this is Farmer Will Allen and the Growing Table. This is about urban farmer Will Allen. He's a former basketball player. He's the first Black to play on a scholarship at the University of Miami. Back in the 70s, he was drafted into the NBA and played for the ABA, and in Europe played basketball. He retired to Milwaukee in 1977 at 28 from basketball, enjoyed a successful career in marketing before he purchased an abandoned plant nursery and began transforming urban agriculture in both Wisconsin, the Milwaukee area, and Chicago. A great book, Farmer Will Allen and the Growing Table, talking about what it looks like and what we eat and where our food comes from. Another great diverse source with that. There is a great Ag in the Classroom lesson from the National Ag in the Classroom program, talking about what what land works best, specifically looking at urban farming and rooftop farming, that idea of growing food in a number of unique locations. You're not going to be able to grow all your food, but giving kids that opportunity, giving students that opportunity to become closer to where their food comes from, that's a huge fix. The Extraordinary Gardener. This is a new book. It's a pre-K 2 book, and I was looking for it. We have it here somewhere, but as you can imagine, things are a little hectic as we're moving in and moving out. But this is a great book by Sam Boughton. The Extraordinary Gardener. Joe is the main character, and he lives in an ordinary building in an ordinary city, but he plants a seed on a balcony, and after waiting a long time and almost giving up, a beautiful tree emerges. And okay, so the trees don't emerge that quick, but all of a sudden his world is transformed from this dull, boring black and white world into all the colors and what goes on with it. Another great book. We pair that with our Tops and Bottoms activity. Another great book, Tops and Bottoms. I'm sure you're familiar with that. But where does our food come from? Does it grow on the top? Does it grow on the bottom? Or as in the book Tops and Bottoms, does it grow in the middle like corn? So I highly recommend The Extraordinary Gardener. All of those would pair well with our Urban Ag Mag. Don't forget, we do have Chicago, East St. Louis, Peoria, Rockford. We've got a lot of major cities with spaces that we could transform and garden activities. On my way into work, even here in Bloomington, I see the community gardens. This is a great activity for students everywhere. Urban areas, rural areas, suburban areas, to stop and think about how we might be able to use agriculture all across our land in the state of Illinois. So that's our Urban Ag Mag. Don't forget about it. Again, all of those are linked on the blog site, beyondthebarndoor.wordpress.com, or contact your county coordinator. Next, I want to talk about another book that is and I really want to talk about this from the perspective of illustrations, The American Farm Bureau Foundation for Agriculture, they have their own publishing company, and it's called Feeding Minds Press. I'm fortunate enough to work with them and to partner with them. We share a lot of book stories back and forth with the fine folks at Feeding Minds Press. But their first book is called Right This Very Minute. Right This Very Minute is a table to farm book about food and farming. Great book by Detlison. She's a Wisconsin area farmer and also children's writer, but she talks about in this book what's going on right this very minute. Now, in most publishing houses, and those of you who heard us talk with Patricia Tote last week about Pick a Pumpkin, most writers don't get to pick their illustrators, and it's up to the editor of the book to pair the illustrator with the author, and that the editor really makes the book come alive. The folks at Feeding Minds Press have done a phenomenal job with this book. There is incredible diversity in this book from the illustration point of view. It's talking about what goes on right this very minute, but in the illustrations you have all sorts of people represented, from not only different ethnic groups, but also there's a person in a wheelchair. Everyone can be involved in agriculture. So the point that I want to make about this book is the incredible diverse illustrations. That's a key factor of this. So the book has to really recommend that, and sometimes it's hard to see that with other books. Sometimes the editor has a very specific thing in mind. All right. Next up, let's go on to, and again, because we've been using these books for a long time, Illinois author Cynthia Katahoda and our Illinois Read selection from a couple of years ago, as well as national book winner, The Thing About Luck. This has two activities, two areas that I want to talk about. It talks about migrant labor, but first off, the migrant labor in this case is Japanese. So you have that Asian aspect to this, but they're harvesting wheat, and there are phenomenal examples and illustrations, and I won't be able to do this justice, but there are phenomenal examples of illustrations of wheat and the wheat harvest. The Cynthia Katahoda used in the book to talk about wheat harvest. Additionally, the main character in this story, her name is Summer, and she's talking about the wheat harvest and what goes on. Her brother, Jazz, has issues. We know that he has issues, and there are issues that Jazz gets in trouble with throughout. Basically, Jazz is on the spectrum, but it's not treated as a joke. It's not treated as a side commentary. It is this girl who is talking about wheat harvest, dealing with her brother who's on the spectrum. So it's a true to life story about those, even with learning differences and how they're involved in agriculture. Again, this book would do wonderful paired with our wheat ag mag. And one of the activities that we pair with this is grinding wheat. Hard to do in a virtual world, but taking the head of wheat, so the aspect of wheat, the top of the wheat, the kernel of the wheat, and you see that on the screen there with the wheat ag mag, and we've harvested it. So what we need to do is we need to thresh it, and we need to get the seed removed from the husk of the little wheat kernel. So you rub it between your hands and you separate the wheat from the chaff, and then you put that into a small pepper grinder and literally grind the wheat. What we're making is whole wheat flour. Cool activity talking about that. And in the book, The Thing About Luck, they're talking about the process of wheat harvest and even all the way into processing. But you're making wheat flour, whole wheat flour. Now your students are used to seeing the white flour. This is brown. But it's a good activity for them to stop and see, what do we do with this? And when they bake bread, now, I used to say nobody bakes bread anymore, but since the pandemic and since our stay at home, people have been baking bread. But how many cups of wheat do you need to make a loaf of bread? I used to say, okay, well, you're going to bake cookies. Cookies, chocolate chip cookies need 2.5 cups of flour. How much wheat do you have to grind to get 2.5 cups of flour? And what about that processing that we see in that whole idea of the food chain bringing it together? And again, accurate agriculture, that's what we're working with here. So that's our wheat grinding activity. If you do get a chance, there are places where you can get wheat. Your county coordinator may be able to secure you some wheat so you can see this. Wheat is harvested in Illinois back around the 4th of July. Most of the wheat's already out of the field now. Another activity for kids to use when you do get back into classrooms, and if we are able to cook again, and this is going to be a great activity for our parents to try at home. Instead of making bread in a bag, what about making tortillas in a bag? We do a lot of stuff with Ziploc bags. You've seen our pumpkin pie recipe. There's an activity called bread in a bag, and you mix everything for a loaf of bread in a Ziploc, and then you pour it out, but you have to have an oven. Hard enough to do a cooking activity at school, let alone have to borrow the cafeteria's oven. Here's an activity called tortilla in a bag. Great activity, making everything you need in a Ziploc bag. The other cool part about this is if you take your gallon Ziploc bag and your 1.5 cups of flour, you're going to make a couple tortillas. What you can do is you can take the dough out, and back in the day, you used to be able to take the dough out, a couple pieces of wax paper, and every kid bring in a Coke or a milk jug and use that as their rolling pin to actually make a tortilla. Then you fry that on an electric griddle in the classroom. Again, that will be doing a lot of cooking in classrooms this year, but another activity for students to be able to take it home and talk about while they're using wheat. Another Illinois author, multi-generational Asian influence, specifically focusing on edamame and the soybean focus, is Illinois author and Illinois Read selection, The Great Soybean Picnic. Auntie Yang's Great Soybean Picnic. Again, Jenny Lowe, an Illinois author, went to the U of I. We're really excited about her. But this book just has phenomenal soybean back matter, and we didn't pay for this book. We found it. It is a Lee and Lowe publication, but this was Illinois Read's Book of the Year for Agriculture 2 years ago. So even before this idea of multiculturalism, a book that we've been using for a while. So great book, Auntie Yang's Great Soybean Picnic. And again, it's talking about multi-generations. If you haven't seen this book, this is just a wonderful book with that idea of families and families coming over and keeping traditions alive and where it comes from. We pair that with our soybean ag mag. And we use that with our soybean ag meg and making beanie babies. That's typically a spring activity as students are starting to see things planting and where we go. Basically the same type of activities you saw in Garden in a Glove. You're going to get a seed to germinate. We're going to take a soybean to germinate and where it gets to. Again, lots of great soybean activities, including Peggy Thomas's book on Henry Ford Grows a Car. But one of the career features on our soybean ag mag is Jenny Yang. She's an entrepreneur from Chicago, and she runs Phoenix Bean. And Phoenix Bean, it's an LLC, a limited corporation up in the Chicago area, and she's making tofu at Phoenix Bean. What they're trying to do to make tofu, transitioning soybeans, and in Chicago, transitioning those soybeans into tofu. Really cool activity to pair with Auntie Yang. As we continue, another great book talking about specialty crops includes A Handful of Stars. This is a 5th through 8th grade book on specialty crops. A Handful of Stars. It's a small town girl from Maine and a migrant classmate. It's a migrant classmate. So she's working with her classmates as they're in for the blueberry harvest. So Maine and blueberries. So they meet and they come together, and all of a sudden there's this contest to be the blueberry queen. And you start to see the transition between migrant laborers and their children interacting with others, specifically in the farm community. Just a phenomenal activity to go along with that. And we'll follow that up with a pre-K2 book, realistic fiction, called Amelia's Road. And Amelia's Road, again, talks about that idea of migrant labor. And as they come along, Amelia and her family, they move often and she doesn't like it. And it really explores that idea of what is normal. Where is her normal? And Amelia finds this path, Amelia's Road. She finds this path that leads to a giant tree, and she really discovers what putting down roots are. And again, another book by Lee and Lowe, really like this, and would pair really well with our specialty crop information. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Another great book, The Circuit. The Circuit. This is a biography, autobiographical text that describes the circuit of the author's childhood, Francisco Jimenez, as he's transitioning from coming up, crossing the border to pick cotton, then to go up and pick strawberries, to go further up and top carrots, and then work their way back down. That idea of migrant labor and what happens. So the stories from the life of a migrant child as they're dealing with this. This is a 6th through 12th grade book. It is featured in students in CPS typically read this as part of their curriculum to go along with that. One of my favorites, one of my personal favorites, is Julia Alvarez's Return to Sender. And we've been promoting this one for a couple of years. This is actually in our first Scrambled States book, and that's 8 years old. So again, we've been using this for a while. It's definitely a 7th through 12th grade story. There are political overtones in it. I will just caution you about that. But Tyler and Mary are 2 kids from different backgrounds thrust together as Tyler's family hires migrant labor in an effort to save the farm. So here's the farm situation. Dairy farm in Vermont. It's a dairy farm in Vermont. Dad and Grandpa make a decision to expand the farm. They're going to expand their dairy herd. They can handle it. Tyler's brother's off at school. When he comes back, he's going to help them. They can make this work. The cow herd has expanded. They're working on it. All of a sudden, out of the blue, Grandpa dies. It happens. Heart attack. It happens. So Tyler's dad is taking over, and his number one son is back in college. He's left with a 12-year-old at home that's trying to help as much as he can, but how is he going to? He's working, burning the candle at both ends. Mom is working off the farm. She needs to work off the farm because she needs health insurance. So there's a lot of realism in this, and Tyler's dad ends up hurting himself really bad, has to recover at home. Who's going to milk the cows? It's not like we can just let them on their own. The cows have to be milked twice a day. They hire migrant labor, and Tyler befriends Mary, the daughter of the migrant laborers. And a wonderful book called Return to Sender. I highly, highly, highly recommend this. Pair this with the high demand for labor in agriculture. There is a demand for labor in agriculture, and it's not glamorous labor. typically during a summer ag institute, you would meet a hog farmer, you would meet a dairy producer, you would meet someone like that that talks about, we have to take care of these animals, we can't do it ourselves, we're looking for people, and it's not glamorous work, we need help. What do we do? How do we get those people to come and help us? It's just a great book that goes along with this. And again, we can pair these activities with our Seasons Ag Mag to talk about specialty crops, what's growing on throughout the season. Our Dairy Ag Mag that pairs really well with Return to Sender, talking about those dairy activities. But I also want you, as you're returning to school and you're thinking about this, to think about what's going on. And there's been a lot of stuff in the news, and this is something that happened back in April as we were talking about that food chain and that whole processing thing. The Department of Labor announced grant funding for migrant and seasonal workers to be able to come in. We need these workers to come in and help with agriculture because there aren't enough people in the United States, number one, that will work, or number two, that could work. So we were using this. So just an issue. It is an issue, and it is an issue in agriculture about what goes on with our labor and our labor force. So we'll take with that. Another great book that talks about specialty crops is My Louisiana Sky by Kimberly Holt, and this is set in the 1950s, rural Louisiana. And the main character, Tiger Ann, is she has to confront living with her developmentally delayed parents upon the death of her grandmother. So, Tiger, her parents are developmentally delayed. And in the 50s, they were not institutionalized, but they were married. They had a child, but they're living with grandma. Everything's cool. Everything's going along with grandma. All of a sudden, grandma dies. What happens when her parents, who have challenges, are forced with raising a child, and how are they going to go along? Mom and dad are mainstays at a greenhouse, and this greenhouse really takes the center stage about what goes on in their work and in their workforce. And again, everyone having a role in agriculture. This is a great book. Really enjoy this book. It was made into a made-for-TV movie several years ago. You might be able to catch that too on a Netflix binge. But My Louisiana Sky, highly recommend this book. Don't want to give it away, but it pairs well with our urban greenhouses. Our urban greenhouses and activities that go along with urban greenhouses. One thing that I have here is I do have a short video, and I want to just show this about that idea of transformation of greenhouses in urban settings. So let's just take a quick break and watch just a second or two of this.
.97% of the land in Teton County is publicly owned. There's very little space available for something like a greenhouse.
Jackson, although it's a rural community, it really acts as an urban community because of the presence of the national park, the high value of land. And so Patty had really gone for a long time trying to find a place for a greenhouse that could operate downtown.
I kind of went pounding on everybody's door. I was bugging the mayor about any piece of land that I saw by looking at the public maps that might be available.
So a town councilman showed us this property way back in 2008.
There was just a little residual piece that was left from the parking garage. It was kind of crunchy, burnt grass, and it wasn't really being used for anything.
And it measures 30 feet wide by 150 feet long. And I'm sure that councilman thought that we would put a hoop house up that might extend the growing season. And I don't think he realized that we had grander visions than this.
I'll stop it there, but the cool part about this is they're talking about Jackson and Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and what they're trying to do is they transition a space in an urban area next to a parking garage into an urban greenhouse. So just a cool and fascinating look at urban greenhouses. And I need to stop this and go to my next slide. My activity that pairs with this, and this is all in the National Ag in the Classroom Teacher Matrix, and it's a lesson here on desktop greenhouses. And it's a third through fifth grade activity that you can make your own desktop greenhouse. Now, speaking of that, let's transition. The greenhouses extend the growing season, but there are a couple of great books from this perspective that really partner well with seasons and what goes on with seasons. 13 Moons on a Turtle's Back talks about the Native American years of the moon, the Native American year of the moons, and what happens in this. In our agri-learning kits that your coordinators have access to, this is one of the book features in the Seasons kit. So again, talking about the Seasons kit. Also that idea from Native Americans, step into the Inca world and what happened throughout Native American culture that has to do directly with agriculture. And you don't think there's agriculture there? Let's just take a little look at popular culture.
And to think we came all this way just to dig it up for gold.
Gold?
Hey, Miko.
What's gold?
You know, it's yellow, comes out of the ground, it's really valuable.
Oh, here, we have lots of it. Gold.
No, gold is this.
There's nothing like that around here.
No gold.
Not that I've seen.
All this way for nothing. Well, those boys are in for a big surprise. And to think we...
I like that activity specifically when John Smith, in theory, hands the Pocahontas. You know, they're discussing gold. What is gold? Well, you know, it's gold and it's valuable and it comes from the ground. Oh, you mean corn? I mean gold. What was valuable and where did it come from? A couple other great Native American books includes Arrow to the Sun and Sacagawea, The Amazing Americans, talking about these activities. And I really like this Sacagawea book, talking about laying together some of the, putting aside some of the fictitious history that goes along with it and really talking about what she did in her role in working with Lewis and Clark. There is a whole section here on most stories talk about, you know, she's pointing the way. And remember, Sacagawea had basically never been along this area. She was just interpreting from her personal experience what could happen. She didn't point the way most of the time. So they're trying to set the record straight. But not only did she was able to transition and to translate for them and help them on their passage to the Great Northwest. So Sacagawea, unique look at agriculture and what happened. And again, Corn is Maize, the gift of the Indians. This goes back a long time from Aliki. It is a stage 2 reader. Let's get ready to read. That activity, you might see this, but that activity to go along with corn and where corn is from. Again, we pair this with the 3 sisters. The corn, the beans, the squash, the pumpkins, where it comes from. So harvest is coming, and I've got a little sketch there. In Chillicothe, over near Peoria, they actually have 3 sisters parks celebrating the corn, the beans, the squash, and how it all comes together. We'll transition into some Eastern European highlights. And Tommy DePola has a lot of brilliant pre-K2 activities talking about that, and you might be familiar with his Stregonona series. And an interesting fact about that, Stregonona on the banned book list for a number of people because they thought of that aspect of Italian immigration and witchcraft that went along with it. But one of my favorites is Pancakes for Breakfast. Talking about this grandmother, this babushka, making pancakes, a great book with no words. So we're telling the whole story as we go through making pancakes and where you get it, Little Red Hen-esque, but again, Tommy DePola and any of his activities. Got a question here. In the 3 sisters, what type of beans? They weren't soybeans, more of a string bean or like a shell bean that you would that you would see in old time gardeners. Could be a green bean, but any type of bean that vines up, they use the corn the bean winds up around the corn. The squash then and the beans have the legumes that put the nitrogen back, they're legumes that put nitrogen back into the soil. So that helps the corn grow, and the squash have the big leaves and they have prickly leaves. So if you're familiar with pumpkins or squash, and that help keep pests away, but also provide shade to keep the weeds down. So that's a great question on the Three Sisters. So additionally, Eastern European immigrants, one of my favorites is a song for Lena about apples, and favored recipes and making your own strudel and where it comes from. And let's not forget my grandfather's coat. Eastern European, you see in the background, they're coming over from Ellis to Ellis Island as people are immigrating to come in. It talks about my grandfather's coat and the importance of passing down clothing. Question for you, and I forgot to skip my slide. Question for you, does that still happen? Do we still pass down clothing? Where is it from? How does it get there? And there's a difference between passing down clothing and hand-me-downs and garage sale finds, but an interesting concept for your students to work with. Don't forget, you can always pair this with your Apple Ag Mag and also our readers. We have our sheep reader. If you go to our website, agintheclassroom.org, over on the left-hand side, teacher resources, the first link says Ag Mags. The next one says Ag Readers. Our Ag Readers are kind of like Ag Mag Lights that you can print off on your own. You want to do something with sheep spinning, sheep wool and spinning wool? The National Ag in the Classroom has a store, agclassroomstore.com, and then you can type in wool spinning and they'll actually send you wool fibers that you can spin your own with. Coordinators may have this at the local level, but you can get classroom sets of that at Ag Classroom Store. Next, I want to transition into some historic Black activities that go along with this. And one often overlooked one is the story of George Crumb. George Crumb and the Saratoga chip. And the inventor of the potato chip, George Crumb. In theory, it's like baseball. It's like Thomas Edison, who invented it, where. But there is a story that George Crumb in New York did in the Saratoga area of New York did develop the potato chip. So talking about potato chips. So our activity with that is not only potatoes, but also frying them. And like everything else, the potato chip was kind of an accident. He was making potatoes and someone didn't like his potatoes that he fried, and they sent him back a couple times. And finally, he crafted the thinnest sliced potatoes that he could imagine, thinking, I'm just going to show this customer, this is how the story goes, and the customer loved it. And thus was born the history of potato chips. So George Crumb and the Saratoga chip, you'll see there, George Crumb Speck, he was a chef and inventor of the potato chip. He ran his own restaurant. He ran his own restaurant from 1882 to 1890. Nationally known, and local patrons dined there. So back in the late 1800s, Saratoga, New York, the inventor of the potato chip, George Crumb. Additionally, George Washington Carver, aspects of George Washington Carver and how that all comes together. One of my favorite books is by Peggy Thomas. Peggy Thomas's George Washington for Kid, his life discoveries with 21 different activities that relate to his life. Now, this is a bigger book than a picture book that you're familiar with Peggy Thomas with. It is really biographical, but it is not a hard read. It is long, but it is not a hard read, but really does do a good job of expressing what George Washington Carver did throughout time. Some aspect of soybeans, a little bit on peanuts, but also the idea of working with sweet potatoes, and Carver and his work with the USDA and extending that to all Americans. Really cool activities to partner with Carver. There are a number of Carver books out there, and another one that we really like is George Washington Carver, The Ingenious Inventor by Nathan Olsen. And this is a graphic novel about Carver and his life. Again, you've got lots of Carver books out there, but two of our favorites are listed there. Next we have, again, you compare this with our Soybean Ag Mag, you compare it with other things. From a 5th through 8th grade level, Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. The one aspect of this that really comes through is there is poor treatment of blacks in the South, granted, but the main thrust of this book is their love of the land. The Cassie and her family and the Logan family and their love of the land and what they're trying to do to protect their land. And as I want you to stop and think about that, those of you who joined us on the field trips, whether you heard Natalie Pratt or any of our commodity group interns or even Charlie just earlier this week, talking about that focus of the land and what happens with the land. It's one of my favorite books. It's an Illinois Read activity, Sorry for Your Loss by Jessie Ann Foley. This is an Illinois 2020 Illinois Read selection. While Pup, the main character, is white, he's the youngest of 8 in a family on the north side of the city of Chicago. They're struggling with the loss of his brother. His brother died. He was a college student. And Pup is befriended by a fellow student, an East African immigrant, a first-generation immigrant. After he's rejected by his longtime crush, he finally finds out that food and culture play a huge role in 2 different families. If you haven't seen this book, if you haven't checked this book out, I highly recommend it. It's my favorite book right now. It's a must read. Sorry for Your Loss by Jessie Ann Foley. Hungry Planet, looking at food all around the world. This is an upper level book for our 4th grade teachers. This would be one to maybe have as a supplement that we're offering with this, but it looks at what the world eats. It looks at families from around the world. It looks at families from around the world with a week's worth of food. Really enjoy this book, The Hungry Planet. And one of the activities to go along with The Hungry Planet is found in the National Ag in the Classroom Literacy, National Ag Literacy Curriculum Matrix. And it's called Filling the Global Grocery Bag. And students learn what factors affect a country's ability to produce their own food and how food expenses differ throughout the world. Even younger level students, I highly recommend teachers of younger level students at 4th through 8th grade, take a look at this lesson and see how you can modify it. But it does have farming from around the world. There are several PowerPoints, and it does reference the book, The Hungry Planet. So as you're looking for activities, that's a really good one. Next up is Rainbow Rowell's Pumpkinheads. Rainbow Rowell's Pumpkinheads. Rainbow Rowell, New York Times best-selling author, fangirl, that kind of stuff. My junior high and high school level students will like this. It is set at a pumpkin agritourism site. Now, this is Rainbow Rowell's first graphic novel, so she's got the story, but the main character is Deja. She's both interracial and bisexual, so we're covering a couple of bases there, but the main focus of this is, we see that it's not the focus of the story. The focus of the story is the pumpkin patch, the agritourism that goes along in the pumpkin patch. It's a great book. I think you'll really enjoy this graphic novel by Rainbow Rowell set in the pumpkin patch. It is an upper level book, so definitely a high school level book, but there is another great level activity that goes along with this on the National Ag in the Classroom Curriculum Matrix called Agritourism, and it's the Extreme Farm Makeover. As a special note to our teachers, we will be offering virtual field trips to your students this year. You'll be first on the list to get that. If you've got a pen, you can write these dates down. August 27th, we're visiting a pollinator area, and we will have a Zoom call that you can join in live on the Zoom call on August 27th to go with pollinators. September 3rd, we're taking a trip to an apple orchard, so there'll be a trip, and then October 1st, we're visiting a pumpkin patch. So we're going to talk about all of this book. We're going to talk about all of these in this book, going to a pumpkin patch, but we'll also have a chance for you to interact and your students to interact with the farmer as we do this. But talking about what would make a good pumpkin patch visit. Hopefully their parents will be able to get out and socially distance with them on field trips over the weekend. We know that those pumpkin and apple orchard field trips will be canceled this year, but this is a great activity to combine with agritourism. So Another great book called By Any Means Necessary, by Candace Montgomery. This addresses a couple of things. First off, our main character, Tori, he's a first generation inner city family member to go to college. So he's going to college. So he's a freshman in high school. Other challenges that he has some other challenges that other students his age don't have. First off, he was left an apiary, bees and beehives by his uncle, and the bank's foreclosing on it. So he's dealing with, he's inherited land with bees. He wants to keep the bees for his uncle. He's first generation inner city black college student, plus he's also gay, all rolled up into one. And the inner city portion of this, explaining bees to others who are in college and the importance of bees, that's the main part of it. You don't know all of the other things. They aren't the leading part of the story. And again, with our books, what we're trying to do is the accurate agriculture that's portrayed in this. Our field trip to the bees coming up in August will be to an urban area. I won't tell you where it's coming from yet, working on the final details, but that idea of bees and pollinators in urban areas really does explain that challenge. So, again, upper level book, By Any Means Necessary. That's actually, the title of the book actually is also a quote by Malcolm X. So there are historic overtones through it. They're there, but they're not the main focus of the book. They are accurate agriculture books. So that's what we have. And I put in here and many, many more. Our goal was to be able to share a number of books with you on the beyondthebarndoor.wordpress.com. Under today's information, I actually have a list of other books as well, broken down by what area they're looking for if you're trying to do it. But remember, what we're really looking for is that accurate agriculture that's portrayed in them, along with being a good and powerful story. And again, looking out after those diverse voices. Some other books that I really like, I just grabbed here, we really like, I just didn't focus on yet, was Love Will, sorry, it's I'm like, what is that? It's called The Thing About Bees. Love this book, The Thing About Bees. There's another great book, The Old Truck, talking about that. Freedom's on the Menu, talking about the importance of the Greensboro sit-ins and lunch counters and why they were there. Another one, The Empty Pot. So a number of great books that are out there. Those are just some of the other books that are on our list. That is on for beyondthebarndoor.wordpress.com, featuring accurate agriculture. All right, so I told you I'd give you 2 books. Actually, I think I gave you 35. Those are all on our website at beyondthebarndoor.wordpress.com, as well as the information that leads to this. I got another quote, the commentary there. To go along with the early elementary, the book Maddie's Fridge addresses hunger and the differences in culture. Maddie's Fridge, that is another good book, Redor, I forgot about it. For your 5th graders and up, there's also another book on hunger called The Last Great Adventure of the PB&J Society. Not necessarily multicultural, but that idea of hunger and where it comes from. So again, just like at our messages with Patty Tote, I could talk about books for a long, long time. With that, folks, I thank you. I'll be moderating the afternoon sessions. You're going to hear from Chris and Stephanie later today, talking about more culture activities. Those are on different Zoom links. So with that, so I'm glad that we got some people that took notes. That's great. But again, all of our materials are on beyondthebarndoor.wordpress.com. Folks, I thank you for joining us. I know a number of you have joined us for all of our sessions. We really appreciate that. We're hoping that next year you'll be able to join us in person at a local activity, and the field trips won't be virtual, they'll be real. Chris did send you some information, and some of you are already signed up for our PD in your PJs. The middle of August, we'll give you a preview of what's coming for September, all of our Apple activities, and the middle of September, we'll give you Saturday morning. We expect you to leave your cameras off and drink your coffee. We got a special treat for you coming, but we'll in the middle of September, we'll give you that preview of what's coming up in October. With that, I'm going to sign off now. Great comments, and I really appreciate this. Again, this will be recorded, and all of our information will be on beyondthebarndoor.wordpress.com here shortly. With that, I hope to see you back on Chris and Stephanie's sessions starting up here in just 10 minutes, and we'll start on the hour for each of them. With that, folks, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. Take care.